Hello, and welcome to the Wade Borth Podcast. I'm your host, Wade Borth, and in every episode, my goal is to get you to think differently about how money works and ultimately to empower you to take control of your money and your personal financing system. Hello, and welcome back to the Wade Borth Podcast. Today is a very, very special guest, a good friend of mine, a person I've known for about a year and a half, 2 years, and it's David Zapata. Thank you, David, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
You bet. So the reason for David being on the podcast today, David's got a fascinating story. It's a story of an immigrant. It's a story of transformation. It's a story of growth. So I thought, man, this is a perfect time to have this conversation because I know a lot of us go through a lot of transformation in our lives, right? So if we're going through transformations, just know that you're not the only one. Every one of us go through a transformation. And it might be big, it might be small, it might be coming here from a different country. It might be coming here from a state of mind that you thought you knew what you knew and all of a sudden you found out you didn't. And so transformation is going to happen. Change is inevitable in our life. But the thing that's optional is growth. How are we growing with that change that's happening? So again, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. I heard that at the IBC think tank last year and I thought that is so true. There's a lot of truth to that statement that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. So, David, with that, would you just kind of give the listeners a little bit of background on your story? The fascinating part, don't shortcut it. I want to hear it all because it's all...
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I certainly have become more and more willing to share my story, and not necessarily because I think it's special or has any particular virtue in it, but because exactly what you said, because I think in sharing with others what we go through, the experiences we have in life, we see commonalities and we see the opportunity to empower each other to realize that growth you're talking about, it is optional, but it's also in our hands. And It takes intention and it takes purpose to go towards that growth. And like you said, right now, I'm a father, I'm a husband. Those are the two most important roles in my life. I'm an IBC practitioner. I'm a family man. I love the outdoors. I love endurance sports. And those parts of me, I'm a man of faith. Those parts of me every day get more clear about how I need to create more abundance and more growth in my life to have the ideal life that I'm pursuing, that growth that I seek that is intentional. And if I look in hindsight, I think you and I have talked about this, it's really hard to look forward and connect the dots, but in hindsight they become very clear, and the pattern for how you've gotten where you are, it's there, and how you can continue to move in that direction is there. So you mentioned it, I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Colombia in South America. So I've lived half of my life in South America, half of my life in the United States. I came here in 2006 and I lived all over the place, New York, Indiana, Ohio, California. Now I live in Arizona, and I'm very grateful and very blessed to have had the opportunity to come to this country. First of all, I became a proud American in 2014, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And interesting thing to talk about change and growth. Changing countries and changing life circumstances and language and culture and just a way to see the world is something that would certainly kick your pants if you just take it as change, because the circumstances will change. And if you don't decide to grow, it's going to really it's gonna kick your pants. And it did for me, for many reasons. And at that time, it was good because it pushed me, it activated me into, okay, I clearly need to change who I am and able to cope and thrive in this situation. So typical story, I have all kinds of jobs, as you can imagine. I never worked in Colombia before. First of all, that was not culturally my circumstance. We weren't wealthy, we weren't poor, we were middle class. My dad's a physics professor, so education was very core to my beliefs, my mindset. And I went through all these experiences of figuring out how America works, how Americans think, how Americans do. And in that, I got a lot of appreciation for American values of independence, on self-reliance, and being the commander of my circumstances, which is, again, why I'm so grateful to have had that contrasting experience to be the backbone of my thinking today. And then if you fast forward, I had great luck in life. Many people that have come across that have given me a hand or have painted a path for me, unbeknownst to them, that have been a significant blessing. And I went through education. I have an engineering degree. I worked for 12 years in the aerospace business and the jet engine industry. And I was engaged in living in corporate America, increasing my income every year, doing the traditional things that most people in that path do. Getting higher education, I got a master's degree, and doing all the right things by conventional standards, saving in retirement plans, and at the same time also keeping up with the Joneses, right? Getting a nicer car, trying to live in better places. All of this I bring as context to say the following. I now in hindsight can see that I was drifting to an undesired location. I did not have intentional plans on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. And I've forgotten about those initial stages of my journey in America, of American values of self-reliance and take control of my direction. And I have drifted into a numbing stage. Everybody was making decisions. I always tell my clients that I cannot tell you the day or the moment or the circumstance, the place I was when I signed up for my 401k plan. And I don't even know. I'm sure I did. I just don't remember. And to me, that says a lot about the mindset I was in at the time.
Very numb, right? So it's just like your mind had been shot full of Novocaine. You just, because that's, I really believe there's a purpose for that. People do, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I think there's a purpose why they say, hey, just sign up. It's a no-brainer. You just get going. But do we give intentional thought to that? And are we getting intentional returns and intentional use of that, of doing those things that are just, quote unquote, automatic? You're going to go ahead and do it. So to that point.
And how does a fish know he's in the ocean? It's all water around him, right? Like everyone around me was doing the same thing, speaking the same language, probably in the same level of ignorance than me. And what I noticed is that a level of dissatisfaction with how things were showing up in my life started to emerge, right? Like I didn't know what it was. I just knew that something was off, right? How is it that I make maybe more income this year and yet I still feel like I'm in a deficiency relationship with my money? That's how I classify. Am I in surplus? Am I breaking even? Or am I falling behind? And I could sense that what I was doing was not working for me. I just couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was. And I thought it was about, okay, I need to work hard so more income shows up. Or I need to maybe compress. I'm going to completely contract and not spend anything. And both directions always left me with dissatisfaction. This is not going to be sustainable. This is not going to be long term. And my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and I, at some point, started in a journey where we realized that we needed to get more education. We needed to understand how things work, and we needed to step into the role where we actually had an active relationship, an active conversation with money. Not hiring someone or not just sending that job away for somebody to make decisions and quarterback for us. I had a financial advisor, quick story. I can tell you exactly the restaurant we were sitting in Ohio, in Cincinnati. And all I remember this guy saying, I was getting into education and real estate, and he said, you need to put me in contact with this person and that person so I can quarterback all this for you. And that was not what pissed me off. The part that pissed me off is sitting in my car realizing that I didn't even say anything back. I didn't take control and say, hey, actually, I'm the quarterback. This is my life. I'm the director of this movie. And looking back on it, that is such a powerful experience because everything that moves forward for my life now, I look through that filter. I need to make sure that I'm living in my terms because life is short and I just want to make sure when I look back that I was an active player. I was an actor and the protagonist of it. So,
you know, and your clients that work with you, and my clients that work, that I work with, and quite frankly, we have some clients that we work together with. We find that the majority of people, they abdicate that responsibility so they can abdicate the blame. Because now, again, blame is great. I want to blame somebody for something that happened, but at the end of the day, it's like I tell my son when and you'll learn this. Now, you have another one on the way. I don't think you shared that with everybody. So congratulations. Looking forward to that. That's going to be super. But this is what I was telling my son when he's getting his driver's license. Now, he's actually he's a better, let's leave that alone. He's a very good driver. And the point I was making to him, he's like, oh, that would have been their fault if they would have ran that red light and hit us. I said, yeah, it would have been their fault. They would have been to blame. But at the end of the day, you could die. So it doesn't do you any good. Yeah. So just because somebody's at fault and somebody else is to blame, you're still stuck with the circumstances of those actions. Yeah. And that's what I see a lot with the traditional financial planning marketplace, that they want to give it to somebody that's supposedly the expert. Now they can wash their hands of it and not be responsible for it. But no matter what happens, they're the ones that are going to have to live with those consequences. So if that's going to be the case, then why not take control? Why not be in control of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way you're saying that makes me think of like, whoever is in control doesn't negate that you are the one dealing with the consequences at the end. So might as well be the driver. It's fascinating that is so intuitively right. But that's not, perhaps, if you're not thinking, that's not what comes first as the first instinct to take control.
Right. But they put up, this is why I love working with David. We have a very similar belief system, but one of my core beliefs, and I know it's one of yours too, is I always want to empower people to be their ultimate, the maximum person that they can be. I want to empower you to be that way. I want to empower everybody that's listening to this broadcast, this podcast, to be the absolute best that God intended them to be. And that's my goal. That's my belief, and that's what I'm trying to do. But it's, when I say empower, but that doesn't mean be a gatekeeper, because I think there's so many gatekeepers. Everybody wants to be a gatekeeper because they keep you in control by being that gatekeeper, and that's kind of what you're running into.
Yeah. I think that describes perfectly the experience I was having, is that there were just too many people I needed to ask permission for my life. And, I'm grateful for it. It was a great catalyst for me to seek change. So that put me and my wife, my girlfriend at the time, in a path where we just started reading books and going to seminars. And Kiyosaki was an introduction to the idea of an asset or a liability. So putting money in my pocket, taking it away. And then when we learned that, we looked at our financial statements like, that's why. All these things are just taking money away from us. It doesn't matter whether our income is here or there. We're just not behaving the right way because we didn't understand that we needed to align our values with what was important, and also with the understanding that assets and liabilities are different things. And we were confounding those two things.
Yeah, but that's, you and I have had this conversation many times too, is like our job can be a lot of things, but I think when we boil it down to what it truly is, it's like what we can do for people is align their values, or their actions with their values.
Yeah.
Because, and sometimes that's a difficult conversation to have because maybe they don't know what their values are. And they're letting their actions just go on automatic. I was in that situation before. You've been in that situation.
Absolutely.
Everybody else is doing it. This is so great. Everybody else is doing it. So let's just go ahead and go with the herd. But when we look at what's really important to us, what it is that we want to do with our lives, are those actions supporting that? And 9 times out of 10, maybe not 9 times, 7 or 8 times out of 10, they're not. So our question, it's like I said, sometimes it's a tough question. What you're doing, is it supporting what your values truly are?
Yeah.
Right? And you used the example of, you were spending money and you were spending money and you were having an okay time, but you weren't finding true value out of it. You were saying like you were spending money on restaurants, and you said we can cut that out because it's okay, but it's not like it brings tremendous joy or value to what we do. It doesn't bring that fulfillment that we're looking for in our lives.
Yeah. Another thing to add to this, because it's an approach that I'm taking now very intentionally, is that I know money is a very emotional subject, particularly because it brings feelings that if it's not a relationship that you like right now, it's going to bring you regret, or it's going to bring you shame. And I've been telling clients that one way that I got back to a healthy place was to realize that everything that I've done in my life has led to who I am today, and I need to decide that I like who I am and I'm grateful. And all it is things to learn from to move towards the decisions and the places that I actually want to be. And approaching it from there, like it's been, I think, actually getting more clear about my purpose and my mission is be an advancing person, to see the opportunity and the good in others for them to express that good. That's how I frame that as what I think is my mission in this. And in this field, we talked about this week, in this field, money is just the instrument to fund everything else in the relationships of your life, whether it's with your spirituality, with yourself, with your family, with your community. It's a way to express a better, healthier place, a better, healthier journey on how to live the life that you actually want to be, and learn from whatever else has come before you. So I think that's been, I call that healing the boy in me. All those past things that you have inside of you and you may feel shame, just be grateful for them, because they inform something that you can be doing moving forward that is going to be the catalyst for growth.
Yeah, that's such great advice, because there's so many people that look back and they're either angry or they're mad or they're bitter because, I should have done this, or that guy screwed me there, or this was wrong, or whatever it was. And I look back, and I can look back at my life, and there's a lot of dark places there, but that shaped who I am today.
Absolutely.
100% shapes who you are today. So you have a choice to either wallow in the past that you can't change or do anything about. Today, right now, immediately, we really can't do much about where we're at now, but we can change what's going to go on in the future, and we can use those as building blocks to make those changes. Because I've heard so many people say, this idea of taking control of the banking function in your life, I wish I would have done this 30 years ago. Yeah, we probably always hear that. How many times do you hear that? I wish I'd have done this 20, 30 years ago. But you can't go back. So it's the old adage, when's the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. Today is the time to make that change. And what's so fun about what we do and how the conversations we have with our clients, and I know this is true for you, is we speak from a position of abundance. Speak from a position of scarcity. In talking about the traditional 401ks, for example, or traditional retirement planning, let's not even pick on 401ks, but that speaks from a position of consumption and being a consumer. Where you and I are having discussion at the next level, it's like, let's speak from a position of business owners or entrepreneur or a person of abundance, instead of saying, and I listen to Tom Hagner, and he always talks about, he says, people with assets in retirement are miserable. They're fearful. Yeah. He says people that have income, cash flow, are happy. And so we think about that, and we should take that to heart, because, again, I know you and I have had this discussion, but you were having the discussion about what's success to you. Is it having a net worth of $3, $4, $5 million? And that used to be your goal at one time, right? Yeah. And that changed. And how did that change? Maybe give us a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, that's a great segue into the chronological story there of how I'm here sitting with you having this conversation. But you can imagine I was surrounded by people I thought I wanted to be like. Great people, don't get me wrong. People that I admire for many reasons. But the conversation was like, once I get to $3 or $4 million in that account, I'm out.
Yeah. Out of working. They hated their job and they're going to quit.
I'm going to quit and I'm going to live life. And I couldn't explain why, but that just didn't sit well with me. And I was going down a path where, like, the more and closer I got to those stages in my career, the more difficult it became to find people that I actually wanted to emulate, that I wanted to follow, because it was just not my path. I've shared this with you. I share it with my clients now, again, in the sake of being more transparent. My mother died when she was 44. I was a teenager. My brother was 9 years old. That left a significant impression in my life. Like, now I can see why I am in certain ways the way I am. I am somebody, I'm here with you right now, and there's nothing else in my mind. I'm giving you my best thinking. I'm opening my heart with you, because I don't know if I'm going to see you tomorrow. So today here, I'm giving you the best of I can to continue to build our friendship. And postponing life for 60 or 65 or whatever people think that traditional planning does didn't work for me, because I had an experience that had shaped my life to, I want to live today, I want to be responsible, I want to do the right things, but I need to maximize my life today, staying in the present, because that's all I have. So that part of the plan never sat well with me. And then as we got more education, going back to the theme you were talking about there, we eventually found infinite banking. And initially, as a client, one of the things that really attracted me were, how do I solve this problem of making sure that I control the banking function, that I'm not, since I have to finance everything I buy, I might as well do it with my bank and not somebody else. That was the client mindset. That was a very logical approach. What transferred this for me between understanding that this was the right thing for my family to what is the right thing for my purpose, what I want to do actually with my life, was when I started understanding the things that do not show up on numbers or on illustration. And you were talking about fear or abundance, and I can tell you that the most significant change as a man in my 30s and late 20s, 30s was when, before I got married, before I proposed, one of the most significant stressors of my life was, okay, if what I'm doing right now is not working financially and I am earning a decent amount of income, how am I going to buy a ring and pay for a wedding and have kids and finance a life that just comes with more and more responsibility? And I can tell you, by having these conversations with friends and other clients in that age group, there's many people that do not see a path forward in a life that they want because they don't know how to connect those things. And I am so grateful that I found this, because what is given me is not only a place to control that function and be confident and know that I'm now, all the things that we talk about, the benefits, right? Not interrupting, right, compounding, having access to money. But the other part that doesn't show up in conversation, if you don't know me, is that I am a more confident parent, a more confident spouse, because I know I have a process that allows me to set a strong foundation for my family. And when I found that, it became obvious that I needed to change my life towards that purpose of sharing this with other families that are seeking this opportunity. So.
Yeah. And you become a more confident business partner. You have. Your growth has been exponential since you've kind of freed yourself from the shackles of conditioned thinking.
Yes.
Because now you're taking yourself and you're putting yourself, okay, I have to think boldly, but now carefully at the same time. You have to be, in essence, you understand that now you're the one that, again, the consequences are going to happen to you. You might as well take the responsibility that goes with it.
Absolutely.
And that's part of that's kind of the double-edged sword of empowerment. You've been empowered to do this, but that empowerment comes with a lot more responsibility.
Yeah. Stewardship. It's
great stewardship.
What a beautiful idea. I mean, that's an American idea at its core, I think. And I love that about my experience, again, living my life now here, is, yes, it comes sometimes with fear and stress. And I think we cannot negate that. But at the same time, is a life worth living for me. And it's a life where I know I'm going to look back and against all the advice of all my friends that maybe are taking a different path or have a different opinion or go and get an MBA and think differently, right, about the world. I am following a path that seems true to me and is true for me, that I see examples of success like banks, like wealthy people, like business owners, large corporations. I think I'm surrounding myself in a camp that is doing things that I think should apply to the me and you level and that I'm grateful that I'm following. And one last comment I wanted to make was this idea of being a mountain of cash and then depleting it whenever you want to be done, receiving an income versus creating cash flow. And I have this friend in real estate that painted the most helpful picture for me to think about this. And I guess we kind of put it together in a podcast conversation, but most people are building a water tank in the back of their house and they're filling it with water over the years. And when they stop receiving rain, they're going to start draining the water. And they pray to God that they're not going to run out of water before they die, which is the number one fear for 72 million people in our country, baby boomers. Or you can start digging trenches today and you can start rerouting a portion of the river behind your home so you can have a constant run of money, which is cash flow, and you can always be able to access and put back water to benefit yourself and your community. And I think there's a lot of beauty in shifting that mindset, because I always notice people around us, many people that are focused on cash flow, their prosperity just tends to grow and they just continue to see more opportunity. And I think that's very fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I mean, there's a reason why Nelson in his book talks about, money's like water. It has to flow. If it doesn't, it becomes stagnant. So it has to flow. And that analogy is exactly right what Nelson was talking about. Yeah. If you don't have your money flowing, if you hold on to it like sand, it will run through your fingers. And eventually you'll have just crumbs left in your hand. Yeah. Where if you have a flow of it, it's much more powerful. This is a conversation I had with my son, and you can catch that. It's a great story. It's another one of my podcasts. I talk about how my son and I are having a conversation, and we explain IBC through nature, right? How water flowing is much more powerful than water reserved.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love hearing you talk about this because I think that's now at my stage of life, what's next, right? It's like, okay, I'm in this boat now. I'm trying to build myself, develop myself, and get more clear about what I want to do and grow. And now I think a lot about, okay, how am I going to be the person capable of teaching my children this and transfer that knowledge, that experience? And I love hearing you talk about your son because it's no different than with clients. Like I tell clients, there's so fewer places in my life where I have other people telling me, hey, I want to be part of your life and I want to bring you value and I want to give you my thinking on your best interest. That is so rare for me. And when you find spaces like that to talk vulnerably about, hey, this is something that I'm stressing about, or this is something that's putting stress on my marriage, or this is something that perhaps is making me move with fear in my business because I'm not willing to make big moves because I don't have a solid foundation. And you can get people to connect emotionally with the idea of having the life they want by doing simple things that lead to that path is really powerful. And I think it's the same way that I want to make sure my children at least grow up with a mindset that I didn't have exposed so they can move the ball forward than I could have.
That was my point, is I didn't want to wait. I don't want my son to wait till he's 34 years old like I had to wait before I really opened my mind up to a greater possibility, because I was in that same boat. I was 401ks, traditional planning, and what kind of drove me, I was like, I didn't like the results I was getting. I didn't like the results my clients were getting. Let me put it that way. And because it was no better than having no planning. It seemed like we did a lot of work, and where did it get people? Not that much further down the street. And so I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And so I hear to that point, We're going to try and give our kids that mindset so they don't have to wait until they're 35 years old in order to find a better path. I'm not going to call it the right path, but a better path.
Yeah.
And use it as a foundational, because it's not, and what I try to explain to people is that IBC is not a product, it's a thought process. More than anything else, is how we think about money. And maybe this is a great time too, is that, when you were first starting to go down this pathway, take this journey down, becoming the idea of you taking control of the financing or the banking function of your life, you're an engineer by trade. So I'm guessing, and I don't know, I'm guessing that you were like very analytical. You wanted to see the numbers. The numbers are the most important thing. And I'm assuming that when you first started down that pathway, that's where your mind went. How far away from that is the correct thinking?
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking, it's so funny. I've gone from telling you that a few years before I was afraid of not knowing how I was going to do things to have kids. Now I'm like thinking about how I'm going to, make it a legacy education play for my family. But yeah, obviously, like and I cannot help myself. The first place where my mind went was, okay, let's look at the numbers. How does this work? Technically, how is this sound thinking? How does it compare? And I was in the wrong places, right? How does it compare to an alternative thing? Is it an investment? Is it savings? And the more I have obsessed about learning more about this, the more I hear Nelson talk. Like, very small phrases, very profound. Think long term. Don't be afraid to capitalize. I thought I understood what he meant. And every year I reevaluate those expressions and I get more depth out of them. And I realize that the farther away I can get from the details, the more I can see the elephant. I was very focused on the details on a table, and I realize now that it has nothing to do necessarily with a set of numbers or a product, but it starts with me. Where is my mind? How am I thinking about a particular situation? Why is long-term thinking important in my life? How does that compare to mine? And when I start there in my mindset, my behavior follows, and the process of me behaving like the banker. I love when you talk to me about the board family bank. I love that. I love the visuals you paint about that, because being behind in the journey from you, it just paints a picture of like what's possible to build the family I want to build. And it is fascinating to me the depth you can get the more you entertain this, when you zoom out and you see, it's an elephant. It was not a piece of leather I was staring at. And I now also find that it's even more effective to bring people back, because I obviously come in contact with other people that are just as analytical as me and love spreadsheets and love things like that. And there's a place for that. The details matter.
Details matter, yeah, absolutely.
The details matter because they set behavior, they set habits, they highlight the importance, they give clarity and understanding. But those details will not lead to the right directional path if you don't have clear that your mindset and your process is what leads the behaviors that create those results. And I started backwards, and I'm grateful that I now have been able to take that perspective of, man, Nelson was very wise in how he spoke about this, the narrative that he used, the stories he told. I think about the grocery store so often, and I wish I would have met him to thank him. But I think about some of these things so often because in hindsight now, it's exactly reflecting what was happening in my life and how it's changed. I stand on those to now remind myself, okay, the behavior is to be a good banker. The behavior is to be a responsible steward, right? Not in the table or the numbers that I cannot remember.
Right. I don't remember, and I'll probably butcher this too, but there's that saying that numbers can tell us a story, but they don't necessarily tell the truth. So we can look at numbers all day long, and we can come to our own conclusion, but that conclusion might not be the truth until we can put it in context. And that's the part that most people miss when, and I think about it, you and I have had this discussion. Every time we talk about it, every time we have a meeting with a client, there's probably 4 steps in that conversation, right? Step number 1, identify the problem.
Yes.
I actually just did a podcast a couple weeks before this one will air. And so if you want to, go back and listen to that one. I always talk about identify what that problem is, right? And then once you identify the problem, you have to say, I want help. I want a better life. I want something different than I'm getting today, because I understand what the problem is. So you're raising your hand. David, you and I are going to help those people. They raise their hand, identify, come into our light. We're definitely going to help them. Third is, let's show them the process. And that process is that's the gray matter between our ears, right? How we think about money, how we put it to work, how we find it to be valuable. So if it's valuable, because money is that. It's got value. I mean, you think about that for a second. Money is, we've traded the most valuable thing in our life for money. We've traded our time for money.
Yeah.
But we don't treat the money with very much respect, because a lot of times we'll spend it and we don't have any idea of how to put it back. How do we treat it better than we treat Wells Fargo's money?
Yeah.
And that's the process, right? And then the last one comes to be the product.
Yeah.
And then, so it has to be that steps, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And a lot of times, and I don't want to pick on analyticals because I'm a bit one myself. I mean, I was going to be an engineer when I went to college. I got my math degree. I was a year away from becoming an engineer until I realized I don't like to be an engineer.
Yeah.
But the problem is with analyticals, with a lot of people, we've been conditioned to think, well, let's turn it on its head. And the first thing we're going to look at is the product. And then maybe we'll find the process, but we forget about the last two. And so we're not looking for anybody to help us, and we don't really understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's where the real problem comes, is we have to have that process, and we have to take step number 1 has to come first. Step number 2 has to come second. Where we want a shortcut and get to the end as quick as we can. And sometimes that can be very detrimental. And I've had conversations with many people about that, is don't skip to the end, because the process is very important. The relationship is the most important thing we have with our clients.
Yeah.
And a relationship is not about a spreadsheet.
It's the conversation.
It's a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to take several steps back humbly and just you work through this. It's very powerful, and not just for focusing on the product, but I probably did not appreciate how important it is, that second step. You've helped me think through this quite a bit, which is, who do I even want to work with? Because this is a commitment. I'm not doing a transaction where I'm selling belts or wallets or shoes. When I work with someone, I'm telling them that I want to be here in the next 30 years to help their kids learn this. And if they pass, I'll be there for their family. That's the kind of level of commitment I'm developing or offering the people I want to work with. And in the same time, I need to make sure that these are people that I want to have a relationship with. So when I'm looking for who is interested in learning about how to solve that problem once they understand the problem, one of the most important things is to make sure that they want that help, that they're seeking for that, just like I was back in 2015 and 16 and 17. I needed somebody, and I was grateful that somebody was there to put that in front of me, because I was willing and ready to receive it. And that's the kind of relationship I want to build. And you've helped me tremendously see how important that is for living the life I want in my community, in my business. The last thing I would say is, man, again, painting a picture for the process is so daunting to imagine how all this works, because you can take so many avenues to learn about even the process itself, how banks work, what happens in the industry, how the product. But the reality is that painting a picture when you can zoom out and say, hey, this is the path that I want. I want to focus on cash flow. My bank as my business funds that venture, and that money comes from the right places and the right products, right? Yeah. Where I don't interrupt compounding and I use leverage in a responsible way. That helps people set a framework where, okay, the person that I need to become does these things. And that is so much more helpful than just, hey, how much can you save? 2, 3, 5, 10%. Let's just take more risk in the market so we can yada, yada. That traditional conversation now seems, again, for me, I don't pretend to tell people what's right or wrong. But for me, now that I've gotten more clear about what I want in my life, this framework of becoming, and I think that's the brilliance of the book, becoming is the active word for me, was what attracted me to this. I want to be the person that in 10 years, when you and I sit down to have this conversation again, we can look back and say all the hindsight we got and where we've gone. It's so hard to see. We're going to need a telescope, because we've been building, using the compound effect to grow and continue to grow. And hopefully our clients, our community follow along on that journey.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. It's so exciting. But to that point, and again, I think it's so important, that second step is we have to find those that are meant to work with us, right? Yeah. Those that are listening to this podcast. They might go, hey, I like weight, but man, that David, I really connect with him. Then I would encourage you, again, because I come from this from a position of abundance. I haven't always been that way. I've transformed that way. Yeah. I come from a position of abundance. If the best person for you, whoever's listening, is to work with David or work with somebody else, make sure that they have similar values that you have. Make sure that they're not being a gatekeeper. Make sure that you connect with them and you want to work with them, because at the end of the day, David, if you're my client, I'm becoming a business partner of yours. But just as important, you're becoming a business partner of mine.
Yeah.
We are going into business together for a very long time. We have to make sure that when we do that, we have a great relationship. We have to make sure that it is a long-term relationship. And if it has to be forced or coerced, quite frankly, I would rather find that out early and find you the right person that you need to work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because life's too short to work with. I used to have a friend of mine, and this was years ago, she used to always say that, I'm too old to drink beer I don't like.
Yeah.
Kind of the same way, right?
Yeah.
Life is too short to be engaged with people in your business, and to invite people to your business and being part of their business. Again, it's sometimes not even about like. It's just about, we're not in alignment. We just, for whatever reason, it's not there. But I would gladly educate you, find you somebody that you can work with to be a much, much better relationship. Because again, my ultimate goal is to empower you to be the best that you can be. Now, if that means working with David Zapata versus working with Wade Borth, man, I'm all for that introduction.
Think how rare that is in an industry or in an economy where people are just trying to take, right? That is the number one advice I give. We're both authorized practitioners by the Nelson Nash Institute, and as part of their search tool, they can find a practitioner in their state. And I often get calls from people, and they ask me a few questions, and I want to understand how well they understand the idea, how much study they've done. And when I leave the call, the one advice I give them every single time is, I hope you find the relationship that best serves your interests and that is going to give you the most amount of fun for the next 30 years, because that's going to be important. Whether it's me or not, it doesn't matter. But I truly want people to find that, because that's going to make the difference between having success and enjoying the process or feeling that this is just another transaction like they've been doing with other routes or avenues. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had a couple other things, David, but maybe we'll save that for the next time we visit. Thank you for sharing your story. The reason why I want people to hear that is, again, we all have hurdles to go through in our lives. We all have change that's going to happen in our lives. We can either embrace those changes, we can figure a way to get over the hurdle, but what you can understand is that there's a quote from Fred Rogers that I used in a training here this week, and it says, when Fred Rogers, who was Mr. Rogers, if people don't know who that is, he said he was afraid to watch the news because there's always bad things happening. And his mom says, don't worry, son, there's always helpers out there. Look for the helpers.
Yeah.
If you start looking with that understanding of abundance and that mindset of positive thinking, you're going to find people that are going to be your helpers to help you over that hurdle. You're going to find people that says, this is a change that's going to go on, so we can either embrace it and we can address it and we can hit it head on. That buffalo walking into the storm. We can do it that way. But understand that there are people here to help you and to be your helper. Yeah. Because, again, your story is amazing to me. I mean, you came to a country, you had to learn a language. I got to tell a quick funny story, and you probably you'll remember this, but we were down in Wyoming. I don't think David Zapata had ever shot a gun before. And maybe you had shot a gun before, but we were out shooting. What's that?
Probably not.
And it was like this look of amazement. We took him out. We were out in this range and we were shooting a clay pigeon. And you were like beaming from ear to ear, because it's like this experience that you just had that you can't explain to anybody.
Yeah.
And that's the same experience. That's the same kind of feeling you get sometimes when you educate people on this whole idea of taking control of that banking function in your life. Is like the sense of freedom that comes with that it's the unseen. It's the hardest thing to explain to people until they've experienced it. Mm. I know that's probably very cliche, but it is so true. This idea of taking control of your banking function, knowing you're the one in control, and now your thought process change and your actions are going to change, but you don't know that until you go down that pathway.
Yeah.
So
I think, just to pay you a compliment, because I think that there's always helpers common, is true for me with you. Like, I've never known a non-abundant version of you, so I'm grateful that I'm meeting you at a point in your life where you're very healthy. And one of the most important things about the influence you're having in my life, in our relationship, is that I am learning that the willingness to share my best, the best parts of me, my best thinking, my open heart, it's a way to build relationships that I want to actually experience in my life. You do that with me. I see it with your clients. I see it with our other business partners. People are drawn to you because they don't expect anything other than getting Wade's best to grow themselves. And I really admire that about you. And I don't take it lightly, because I think it's an example for me with my family and how I want to show up to the world. So thank you. And to your audience, I just want to send you this thought. And it is, life is going to be short, regardless how long you live. And I'm, in relative matters, a young man. But it's not lost to me based on my experiences with my own mother, with my family. That time that is here is the only thing we have. And the future is not promised, and the past is gone. And I hope you're living a life that is worth pursuing, that it gives the possibility to experience the feelings, the relationships you want, that empowers you to plan for a future and to build who you want to be. Infinite banking has been a very powerful tool to give me that confidence, and I hope that whether you agree with it or not, whether you entertain it or not, at least you give yourself the opportunity to think and rethink your thinking, like Nelson suggests,
Right.
so you can build the life you want. And it certainly is possible for any of you out there listening. And I would encourage you to continue to listen to Wade's advice, because it's been a blessing in mine.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. That's fabulous. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
Thank you for having me.
Before we break into tears, I'm just going to say thank you again for joining us. This has been helpful. We'll continue to have these conversations because I think it is the journey that we're going down. Like I said, I've been doing this for a number of years. I plan to do it for a lot more years. And so my journey, in my mind, is just beginning. And I truly hope and believe and understand that it's going to get better and better every year. That's what I'm so excited about. Is that I don't look forward to retirement. I look forward to tomorrow because I'm making a huge impact. I know you think the same way. So our journey, and again, our journey is just different start times, and that's all it is. But the journey it really doesn't need to be any different. It's about abundance, it's about control, it's about all these things that are unseen that we're going to experience together. Because again, you're one of my helpers. And so it is truly one of those things where we're going to experience together. And the more people we have going down that journey, the better off we're going to be. So again, I thank you. We're going to have a conversation about this maybe a year from now, 6 months from now, 10 years from now. And we're going to have a lot more stories to tell. So again, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to our next meeting.
Thank you so much, Wade.
All right, take care. If you're enjoying this podcast or know anyone else that might be interested, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and please leave a review. This will help this podcast reach and help more people by ranking higher in searches and ultimately help more people get out of financial bondage. And don't be afraid to share this podcast with your friends and family, as we can be easily found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.